Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Stepmate. Episode 7. Chapter 92 The Meeting. Madeline's POV. I was worried. I wasn't sure if keeping quiet was the right thing to do. I was sure that the council would expect me to say something. I was sure that they would want me to say something. She was in there because of me. I was sure that they wouldn't want me to stay silent. I was also worried about Dimitri not letting me help him. Didn't he trust me? Didn't he think I would be a good queen? Did he think that I would embarrass him or do something wrong? I had so many questions on my mind, but I was afraid to look for answers. What would I do if I found out that Dimitri didn't trust me? What would I do if I found out that he thought I would be a bad queen? A knock on my bedroom door made me look away from the window. "Come in," I said and watched the door open. Ellie walked inside and smiled at me. "Are you ready?" she asked, looking around the room. "Where is Dimitri?" "Shower," I mumbled as I turned around and leaned against the windowsill. "He will be here in a minute." Ellie closed the door and looked me up and down. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "You look worried." I gulped and took a deep breath. "There is no need to worry, Mads," Ellie said softly. "Dimitri will handle it." I shook my head and looked at my feet. "That's exactly what I'm worried about," I mumbled. Ellie was silent for a moment. "Why?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion. "He can handle them, Maddie. You don't have to be worried about him." I looked up at her and sighed. "I am not," I said, shaking my head a little. "I know that he can handle them. I believe in him." I stopped talking and bit my lower lip. I wasn't sure if I could share this with Ellie. She seemed great, but I barely knew her. "Just what?" Ellie asked, furrowing her eyebrows. I took a deep breath and released it slowly. I had nothing to lose by telling her. At least I hoped so. "I wish he would let me help him," I said. "I don't want him to handle those things alone. This whole thing is about me anyway. I am the reason she is being punished." "No, Maddie," Ellie said immediately. "She is the reason she is being punished. She chose to hurt you. She chose to do those things, and you are not the reason she is in that cell." I looked back at my feet and took a deep breath. "And I am sure that Dimitri wants to handle this himself because of Kendrick," Ellie finished with a sigh. I looked back up at her and furrowed my eyebrows. "That guy is disgusting, Maddie," Ellie said, rolling her eyes. "Didn't you see the way he was looking at you? Didn't you read his mind?" I furrowed my eyebrows, trying to remember if I ever read his mind. I couldn't remember it, though. And then I remembered why. "I was always with Dimitri," I said. "I couldn't read his mind because I was always with Dimitri. I didn't know why, but I never heard other people's thoughts when I was around him. I didn't even think about that whole issue in the last couple of days. Something more important always came up. Besides, I was with him all the time lately, so I couldn't read anyone's mind." "Well, that explains it then," Ellie mumbled. "I wonder if you could read his mind if you were alone with him." "Alone with who?" Dimitri's voice made both Ellie and I flinch. I looked at him and my heart raced. He looked amazing in the suit he was wearing. I bit my lower lip and imagined taking it off him. "Madeline." He mind-linked me. "Stop it." He narrowed his eyes at me and I gulped. "Alone with Kendrick," Ellie said, interrupting our silent conversation. Dimitri growled loudly. "That is never going to happen." She is never going to be alone with that pathetic excuse of a man. Ellie raised her hands in surrender. I didn't say that she would, Dimitri, Ellie said calmly. I was just wondering if she would be able to read his mind if she was alone with him. Ellie looked at me and furrowed her eyebrows. Well, not alone, she added. If she was with him without you being present there. Dimitri growled again. He approached me and pulled me to his chest. We will never know the answer to that question, he said angrily. I will never allow him to be near her without me being present there. I don't need Maddie to read his mind to know what he is thinking. Ellie raised her eyebrows and nodded. I agree, she mumbled. It is pretty easy to know what she is thinking. Dimitri was shaking a little. I rubbed his back and he looked at me. It's okay, I said softly. I will never be alone with him. You will always be there. I smiled at him and he leaned in to kiss me softly. Mine, he mumbled quietly. I am yours. I mind-linked him. I am only yours and no one is taking me from you. He caressed my cheek and took a deep breath. I love you. I told him through our mind link. I love you too. He responded. More than anything else in this world, Maddie. I smiled at him and he placed another kiss on my lips. Okay, enough, Ellie interrupted, sighing loudly. You need to go. You will be late. Dimitri took my hand in his and lifted it to his lips. He kissed my knuckles and smiled at me. Everything is going to be okay, princess, he said softly. Let's get this over with. I nodded and he started leading me out of our bedroom. My stomach was twisting and turning painfully. I had a bad feeling about the meeting. It happened before. Madeline's POV. My heart was racing. My palms were sweaty. It was hard for me to breathe. I kept gulping, even though my mouth was completely dry. I didn't know why I was so nervous. Maddie, princess, it will be okay, Dimitri said again. Don't worry, my love. I will handle everything. He pulled me to his chest and I relaxed a bit. I love you, princess, Dimitri said softly as he ran his hand down my back. Everything is going to be okay. I promise. I looked up at him and forced a small smile on my face. He leaned in and kissed me softly. I relaxed even further and I was able to breathe a little bit better. My love, Dimitri mumbled as he caressed my cheek. My whole world. My heart skipped a beat and I felt tears in the corners of my eyes. He loved me so much and I couldn't believe how lucky I got. I loved him just as much. I loved him with everything I had. My heart was beating for him. A knock on the door made me tense up again. Dimitri placed a soft kiss on my forehead and I sat up straighter, fixing the wrinkles on my dress. Come in, Dimitri said calmly. The door opened and all three council members walked inside. I looked at Kendrick immediately. He had a smile on his face, but it turned into a smirk when his eyes caught mine. What I would do to her? I would do until she was screaming and crying. I wouldn't stop until she was sobbing. I would use her like the pretty doll that she is. My heart stopped beating. I could hear his thoughts. Those were his thoughts, weren't they? But how was that possible? Dimitri was right next to me. He was holding my hand. I glanced at Landon and Ryan, but I couldn't hear what they were thinking. I looked back at Kendrick and I was hit with another one of his thoughts. I bet she is great. I bet she is perfect. I bet she would take me so well. My stomach twisted and I almost threw up. His smirk made it all worse. Please take a seat, I heard Dimitri's voice. My queen and I, unfortunately, Don't have much time. We are preparing for the Alpha meeting. Understandable, my king, Landon said as he sat down on one of the armchairs opposite Dimitri's desk. We won't take up much of your time. We would just like to know why is our former Luna locked up in a cell. Her skin looks so soft. Dimitri is so lucky. How did he manage to get a mate like her? Why couldn't she be mine? Will I ever get a chance to touch her? Will I ever get a chance to hear her scream? My heart was at the point of jumping out of my body. Bile kept rising and I kept swallowing it down. Dimitri started explaining what happened, but I couldn't focus on him. I wasn't listening. I couldn't look away from Kendrick. Why could I hear his thoughts and not Landon's or Ryan's? Why his? That never happened before. I could never hear anyone's thoughts when Dimitri was around me. And then I remembered. That wasn't true. Something like this happened before. It happened with Janet. I could hear her thoughts when I went and tried talking to her. Dimitri was there, but I could still hear her thoughts. So much happened after that and I completely forgot about it. But it happened before. Kendrick was now looking at my mate and the hate in his eyes made my whole body shiver. He doesn't deserve anything that he has. He doesn't deserve to be a king. He doesn't deserve a mate like her. He doesn't deserve with her every night. He should have never become a king. I tightened my jaw. I felt anger rising in my body. He was thinking badly about my mate and my protective side came out. I had to hold back a growl. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to show him what happened when you messed up with me. I wanted to. Was it really that bad, Luna? A voice interrupted my thoughts. I flinched and looked at Ryan. I furrowed my eyebrows a little. The abuse, Luna, Ryan explained when he saw my confused face. Was the abuse really that bad? Say yes. Dimitri mind-linked me sternly. Yes, I said immediately. Look at those lips. They would look perfect wrapped around me. I would make her suck me until I saw tears running down that pretty face of hers. Maybe I would even make Dimitri watch. I would turn his mate into my little slave, and I would make him watch. I felt my heart stop. I felt the blood in my body freeze. Are you okay, Luna? Someone asked. You look a bit pale. The disgust and the fear I felt must have been very obvious. Maddie. Dimitri called me worriedly. He cupped my cheeks and made me look at him. What is wrong, princess? He asked as he studied my face. Maybe I could take her to the pack hospital while you three finish up the meeting, Kendrick said. She doesn't look well. No. I screamed through the mind link. Don't let him take me. Dimitri furrowed his eyebrows and I saw anger in his eyes. I would never let him take you anywhere, Maddie. He said before he looked at him. Thank you, Kendrick, but I will be the one to take care of my mate, Dimitri said politely, but I could hear the anger in his voice. Oh, what a shame. I was hoping to get a moment alone with her. Maybe I would get to touch her soft skin. I started trembling. Dimitri looked back at me and I saw fear in his eyes. What is wrong, Madeline? He asked me. Talk to me, princess, please. I gulped and tried to take a deep breath. I can hear his thoughts. I said. I am terrified and I can't listen anymore. I just can't. Dimitri's eyes widened. I could tell that he was holding himself back from snapping. Can we please take a small break? Dimitri asked as he looked at the three of them. My Luna isn't feeling well. Of course, I heard Landon say. We will be waiting in front of the office. I heard them stand up, but I didn't want to look at them. I was trying so hard to keep Kendrick's thoughts away. I was scared that all the effort would be useless if I looked at him. I didn't know if I was more scared or more disgusted, but I knew that I didn't want to see him again. Exceptions. Dimitri's POV. My entire body was shaking with anger. I saw red and I wished that I could wrap my hands around her neck and squeeze. Why was Maddie so scared? What was she thinking about? Can you and Ellie come to my office? I mind-linked Will as I watched those three bastards walk out. Is everything okay? Will asked worriedly. Is the meeting already over? No. I said. Just get here. I cut our mind link and focused on Maddie. I pulled her onto my lap and I tightened my arms around her. Princess, I spoke, but she interrupted me. I am so sorry, she mumbled. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't listen to that anymore. I didn't mean to ruin the meeting. I didn't want to, I interrupted her by lifting her head and placing a soft kiss on her lips. You didn't ruin anything, Princess, I said. You should have told me sooner. You should have told me the moment it happened. I would have ended the meeting immediately. I caressed her cheek and kissed the tip of her nose. You come first, Madeline, I added. You always come first, my love. I didn't give a shit about that meeting. Maddie was scared and I would do absolutely anything to take that fear away. The door to my office opened and Will and Ellie walked inside. Both of them had worried looks on their faces. What happened? Will asked, looking from me to Maddie. Are they in front of my office? I asked Will through our mind link. Yes. He said. Close the door and sit down. I told him. He did as I said and approached my desk. Ellie was already sitting in an armchair and looking at Maddie worriedly. What happened? Will asked as he sat down. I kissed Maddie's temple and took a deep breath. Maddie could hear Kendrick's thoughts, I said quietly. My office was soundproof, but I still didn't want to take any chances. Ellie's eyes widened. Will gasped quietly. What? Will mumbled. How? I thought that she couldn't hear them when she was with you. What was he thinking about? Ellie asked at the same time. I looked at Maddie and saw that she closed her eyes and gulped. What was he thinking about? Was he thinking about hurting her? If the answer to that question was yes, I was going to kill him. Skol growled and I felt his anger pulsating inside me. Ask Sky, I told him. Maddie probably won't tell me. She will want to protect me. I'm on it, Skol mumbled. How is that possible, Maddie? Will asked. Is this the first time something like this happened? Maddie sighed and shook her head. My entire body froze. What? I mumbled. It happened before? You could hear his thoughts before. Maddie looked at me and shook her head. No, she said quietly. This was the first time I could hear his thoughts. I furrowed my eyebrows in confusion. But you could hear someone else's while you were with Dimitri? Ellie asked, making Maddie look at her. Maddie nodded and my blood started boiling. Why didn't she tell me? Whose thoughts could she hear while she was with me? Whose? Will asked her. I was too angry to speak. Maddie glanced at me and took a deep breath. Janet's, she said quietly. My mother's. When? Why didn't she tell me? I am so sorry, Dimitri. She mind-linked me and I could hear the fear in her voice. Please don't be angry. I am sorry. My heart clenched painfully and I pulled her to my chest. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the whole situation we were in. She was trembling and I instantly wanted to rip my heart out. I scared her. I am sorry, princess. I said. I am not angry at you, okay? Please don't be afraid of me. She wrapped her arms around me and I felt her relax a little. I am not afraid of you. She said. I just hate it when you are angry. I kissed her temple and ran my hand down her back. When did that happen, Mads? Will asked, interrupting our moment. Maddie lifted her head and looked at him. When Dimitri and I went to talk to our parents, she said. I wanted to talk to Mike and Janet. I wanted to start over. She just started yelling and then SKOL took over Dimitri and we left. I remembered that day. SKOL was pissed. I tightened my jaw and made her look at me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, trying to remain calm. She shrugged and furrowed her eyebrows. I don't know, she said. A lot has happened since then and I completely forgot about it. I didn't even remember it until I heard Kendrick's thoughts and thought it was the first time something like that ever happened. So Kendrick and Janet are exceptions to the rule, Will mumbled, making me look at him. I wonder why that is. Did their thoughts have anything in common, Maddie? Ellie asked. Maddie flinched a little. She tightened her fists and gulped. SKOL. I called my wolf. Did she tell you? SKOL was silent. I didn't even realize that I couldn't feel him that well. SKOL. I called him again after he didn't respond. Give me a moment to calm down, he mumbled. I will kill him. He must have pulled away to stop himself from taking over. Yes, SKOL mumbled. I need a moment. What was he thinking? SKOL growled and I took a deep breath. I really needed to let him calm down a little because he would kill him if he took over. I was impressed by his ability to hold back and think rationally. He knew that killing Kendrick would cause chaos. I was impressed that he could pull away to calm down and control himself like that. He was an animal after all. You're an animal, he said, growling at me. I may be a wolf, but I am also an alpha. I have more control than you think. I'm sorry, I said, will you just tell me what Sky told you? SKOL growled and started talking. The anger I felt toward him grew after every word SKOL spoke. It was pulsating inside me and threatening to explode. I was blinded by rage. Nothing to do but wait. Madeline's POV. Dimitri was shaking with anger after SKOL told him everything. Sky actually spoke to me before she told SKOL. She actually told me she was going to do that. I was very grateful for it. I wasn't blindsided by the three of them for a change. I only did those things to protect you, Maddie, Sky sighed. I couldn't let that woman bully you anymore. She needed to get punished. I know, Sky, I said as I ran my fingers through Dimitri's hair. But it is nice to be informed for a change. I will try to do that in the future, Sky said, chuckling a little. I was hoping that there wouldn't be a need for her to inform SKOL about anything anymore, but I appreciated that she wouldn't keep anything from me anymore. Well, at least I hoped so. I am going to kill him, Dimitri said, his eyes darkening. He is a dead man. Will furrowed his eyebrows and looked at me. Sky told SKOL what Kendrick was thinking, I explained. Will raised his eyebrows and looked back at Dimitri who was shaking and growling quietly. His arms were wrapped around my waist and they felt like steel rods. I wouldn't be able to get out of his hold even if I wanted to. He will never be able to do those things, I said as I leaned in and kissed his temple. I am yours. Dimitri glanced at me and his hold on me tightened even more. He didn't calm down, though. I am just going to assume what he said, Will mumbled angrily. Dimitri growled and closed his eyes. I ran my fingers through his hair again. I hated seeing him this upset. I didn't want him to know because I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want him to feel like this. But Sky would have told him if I agreed to or not. Of course I would, she said. You can't keep those things from him, Madeline. He needs to know so he can protect you. I sighed and kissed his temple again. I wanted to protect him too. I needed to protect him too. There is no need to waste our time on that, Ellie said, making me look at her. He will never get a chance to touch her. I will kill him if I have to. We have to focus on the fact that she could hear him while she was next to you. That is more important. Dimitri growled and narrowed his eyes at Ellie. Don't look at me like that, Dimitri, Ellie said, crossing her arms over her chest. You know that I am right. Do you really think that any of us are going to let him get close to her? Ellie snorted and shook her head. Will is the first one who would rip his head off his shoulders, Ellie continued. He may not have given her his oath yet, but he is already living by it. I glanced at Will and saw him smile a little. He is not getting anywhere near her, Dimitri, Ellie added softly. Don't let his words get to you. They are just words. They will never come true. I felt tears in the corners of my eyes. I never thought that they would be so dedicated to protecting me. The things he was thinking about were vile, Dimitri said, his voice raspy and deep. Are you seriously telling me to let it go? I looked at him and my heart clenched painfully. He looked like he was in pain. I tangled my fingers into his hair and placed a kiss on the side of his lips. I leaned my forehead against the side of his head and took a deep breath. His pain hurt me more than those things Kendrick was thinking about doing to me. Dimitri pressed me even closer to him. His hold on me tightened even more. It was starting to be uncomfortable, but I would never tell him that. He needed it. He needed to know that I was here and that I was okay. She is right, Dimitri, Will said. Was he forming some sort of plan to take her, or was he just thinking about the things he would want to do to her? I could hear the anger in Will's voice. If he was forming a plan, he would already be dead, Dimitri said, growling quietly. Will sighed. I thought so. You know that you can't kill him, Dimitri. He didn't do anything. You can't punish him for his thoughts. And not to mention that you would put Maddie in danger if you did so, Ellie added. No one needs to know what she can do. Not until we figure out what it all means. Dimitri tightened his jaw and gulped. We are right, Dimitri, Will said after a few moments of silence. You are letting your instincts guide you, but I am here to be the voice of reason. I wouldn't be a good beta if I didn't talk some sense into you from time to time. I looked at Will and smiled. He was an amazing beta and an even better friend. I was happy that Dimitri had him in his life. Dimitri took a deep breath and released it slowly. I kissed his temple again. He ran his hand up my back and tangled his fingers into my hair, keeping me close to him. Mine, he mumbled quietly. Yours, I said as I smiled and caressed his cheek. When is the healer coming? Ellie asked, making me look at her. Tomorrow morning, Will said. I am hoping we will know more after he arrives. I was hoping that too. Oscar was an amazing healer and he helped my mom so much. I knew that I would be able to talk to him about what was going on. I knew that he would listen and keep an open mind. I knew that he would try to help even if he didn't know anything about what was going on with me. Well, I guess that there is nothing to do but wait, Ellie mumbled quietly. I sighed and looked back at Dimitri. He seemed a bit calmer, but I could still see that he was upset. I love you. I mind-linked him. He looked at me and pulled me into a hug. I love you too, Maddie. He said. No one will hurt you while I live and breathe. I promise you that. I took a deep breath and relaxed in his arms. I believed him. I knew that he would never let anyone hurt me, and I knew that I was safe with him. I would always be safe with him. Holding it together. Dimitri's POV. Will you be able to finish the meeting? Will asked as they started walking toward the door. I kept my eyes on Maddie, trying to hold it together. We decided she would go with Ellie and Will while I finished the meeting. I didn't want her in the same room as him. I didn't want her anywhere near him. It was hard, though. I wanted to keep her next to me. I wanted to make sure that she was safe. I wished that I could just tell the council members and kill them just like I would kill my mother, but I couldn't do that. I won't kill him if that's what you are asking, I mumbled, making Will raise an eyebrow at me. I sighed and tightened my jaw. Just keep Maddie safe, okay? I said, clenching my fists. I will finish as soon as I can and I will meet you at the training center. We agreed that Ellie and Will would take Maddie to the training center. Mike was there and I knew that she would be safe with him. If I had to let her out of my sight, I would make sure that she was as protected as possible. Don't worry. He mind-linked me. Nothing will happen to her while I'm around. Ellie took Maddie's hand in her and pulled Maddie closer to her. My heart clenched painfully. I really didn't want to let her go. I love you, princess. I mind-linked her. I will be there soon, okay? Just stay with Will and your dad at all times. I will. She said, giving me a small smile. Don't worry. I will be okay. I tightened my jaw and forced a small smile on my face. I would always worry. She was carrying my entire heart and soul with her. If something happened to her, I would be a dead man. I watched as Will opened the door. The three of them started walking out of my office and I thought that my heart would jump out of my body. I could hear Will talking to the council members. I could hear them responding. I didn't understand what they were saying, though. I couldn't see Maddie anymore and I started to panic. Kendrick was the first one to step back into my office. My vision blackened and I wanted to jump at him. I could already picture myself ripping his throat out with my canines. I could already imagine his bleeding out on my polished floor. I could already hear him gasping for breath as I growled above him. Ryan closed my office door and the sound snapped me back to reality. Is our Luna okay? Landon asked. She looked a bit pale. I clenched my fists and forced a small smile on my face. She is, I said. She is just a little bit overwhelmed with everything that happened with my mother and Savannah. Talking about it upsets her. Landon nodded. Understandable. I wish that we were able to talk about it with her, though. Her testimony is of high value, my king. I am here to answer all of your questions, I said, trying to remain calm. She shared everything that happened with me. I am more than capable of speaking for her. Landon and Ryan gave me a small nod. I could tell that they weren't pleased, but there was nothing they could do. I tried to keep my eyes on them. I didn't want to look at Kendrick. I was barely holding it together as is. We are concerned about the consequences for the kingdom, my king, Landon said. What will your subjects say after they find out that their king killed his own mother? It could lead to anarchy, my king. I tightened my jaw and tried to take a deep breath. My subjects are aware of the law, Lord Chancellor, I said. They know what happens if one threatens their king or queen. I am more afraid of the consequences if I don't punish my mother accordingly. My subjects could see that as favoritism. Has she ever really endangered the queen's life, my king? Ryan asked. Was the abuse so severe? Anger exploded inside my body. Are you really asking me that, Ryan? I asked, gritting my teeth. Does it matter how hard she hit her? She abused her for months. She endangered her more than once. She admitted that she threatened to kill her. What else do you need to hear to agree with my decision? We would agree immediately if it was anyone else, Kendrick said, and I had no other choice but to look at him. We agree with Savannah's punishment. But we are talking about our former Luna. She isn't just anyone, my king. I had to force myself to breathe. I wanted to claw his eyes out. Law is law, Kendrick, I said, trying to sound calm. Titles don't matter. The law isn't excluding anyone, not even you and me. We would be sentenced to death if we acted against her, just like my mother is going to be. Kendrick narrowed his eyes slightly. I think it is important we present a united front to your subjects, my king, Ryan said, and I was finally able to look away from Kendrick. I don't think we will reach an agreement today. Shall we meet again after the Alpha's meeting? My decision will remain the same, I said sternly. If you need some time to get on board with it, I am more than happy to meet with you again after the Alpha's meeting. I wasn't going to execute her before anyway. Ryan sighed and looked at Landon. Think about it, my king, Landon said. She is your mother after all. I tightened my jaw and shook my head. She is not my mother, I said angrily. She is someone who hurt my mate. She is someone who tried to take my mate away from me. Reminding me that she is the woman who gave birth to me won't make me reconsider my decision. I will kill anyone who tries to take my mate from me. I looked at Kendrick and narrowed my eyes slightly. I was hoping that he got the message. If there aren't any more questions, I would like to bring this meeting to an end, I said, looking back at Landon. I have work to do. Of course, my king, Landon said as he stood up. We will talk again after the Alpha's meeting. I nodded and watched the three of them leave my office. They were insane if they thought it would change my mind. I would kill my mother and I would watch her die with a smile on my face. No one hurt my mate. No one. My father. Madeline's POV. I missed Dimitri as soon as I walked out of our office. I worried about him as well. Would he be okay? Would he be able to finish the meeting? Maybe I should have stayed with him. He will be okay, Mads, Will said softly as he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. He will be back with you soon. I looked up at him and he smiled at me. I'm just hoping he won't let Skol kill Kendrick, Will added with amusement in his voice. That would only create more work for me. I chuckled and shook my head at him. He won't kill him, Ellie said. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I took a deep breath and released it slowly. He wasn't going to kill him. He knew it would be wrong to do so. We walked into the training center and Mike immediately looked at us. Honey, he exclaimed and rushed toward me. What are you doing here? He pulled me into a hug and I patted his back gently. Dimitri is in a meeting, Ellie said. We wanted to show Maddie around the training center. We will be coming here daily so she needs to get familiar with the place. Mike grinned widely. Oh, I can't wait, honey, he said. It will be nice to spend more time with you. I can't wait. Maybe spending more time with her will be good for us. I can finally show her how sorry I am for what I have done. Maybe she will finally see how much I love her. Mike's thoughts made my heart race. Mike smiled and pulled me into another hug. My little girl. I love you so much. I am terrified that you will never know how sorry I am. I am terrified that you will never know how much I missed you all these years. I am terrified that I will never be able to prove to you how important you are to me. I wish you knew how much I loved you. My heart clenched painfully and I did something I never thought I would. I wrapped my arms around Mike and hugged him tightly. I closed my eyes and leaned my head on his chest. I could tell that he was a bit shocked. Every time he hugged me I would be still as a statue. I would just pat his back gently and step away a second later. I never hugged him back like that. "Oh, my baby," he mumbled as he placed a hand on my head and held me close to him. "It will be nice to spend more time with you too, Mike," I said quietly. Something between a sob and a laugh escaped Mike's lips. He kissed the top of my head and rubbed my back. "I can't wait, honey," he said softly. "Maddie." I heard Seth's voice. I let Mike go and looked to my left. Seth was standing a few feet away. He was smiling and he looked so happy to see me. "Seth," I said as I started approaching him. He reached out for me, but Will pulled me back. "No touching," Will said. "Dimitri will lose it if he smells him on you. He just marked you, Maddie." "Oh, right. I completely forgot about that. He marked you." Seth mumbled and looked at my neck. My heart clenched. He looked so sad and I wished there was something I could do. "He did," Will said sternly. "You need to stay away, Seth. Especially now that the mark is fresh." Seth gulped and looked at Will. He gave him a small nod. "How are you, Seth?" I asked, giving him a small smile. "I feel like I haven't seen you in ages." A lot had happened in the last few days and I couldn't tell for sure how long it had been since I last saw Seth. I really felt like it'd been ages. We saw each other daily before my birthday and this was a little bit weird to go a few days without seeing him. "I feel like that too, Mads," he said and I could hear sadness in his voice. "We miss you at the diner." I smiled and took a deep breath. "I miss you guys too," I said. "I miss working there." "You can always come back," Seth said with a hint of amusement in his voice. "I am sure that we will have a lot more guests if the word gets out that our Luna is working there again." I laughed and nodded. "I am available if you need me," I said, making Seth grin. "That will not happen, Madeline," Will said sternly. "You are a Luna. You won't be working there anymore." I looked at Will with a confused expression on my face. Seth and I were just kidding. Will was staring at Seth with an angry expression on his face. "We are just kidding, Will." I mind-linked him. "What is wrong with that?" Will glanced at me and tightened his jaw. "He wants you, Madeline," he said. "I need to let him know that you are not available." "How about I show you around, Mads?" Ellie said and took my hand in hers. "We didn't come here to chat." Ellie started pulling me away and I looked at Seth. "I will see you around," I told him. "See you, Mads," he said, giving me a small smile. Goddess, will I ever stop being in love with her? I don't even care that she is marked. I still want her. Will this feeling ever go away? I looked away from Seth and did everything I could possibly think of to silence his thoughts. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to know that. Why is Will so angry at Seth? I asked Ellie, trying to distract myself. Seth is just being nice. I obviously knew how Seth felt about me, but he never did anything inappropriate. He did kiss me, but that was before we knew that Dimitri was my mate. Ellie looked at me and raised an eyebrow. You are not blind and you can read his mind, Maddie, Ellie said. I know that you know Seth is in love with you. I sighed and gave her a small nod. He was never inappropriate, though, I said quietly. He was always a good friend to me. Well, Will is being a good friend to Dimitri, Ellie said. He won't let anyone near you, Maddie. Especially not someone who is in love with you. I sighed again and looked back at Seth. He was talking to Will and Mike. All three of them looked a bit tense. I wished that I could somehow explain to them that Seth was not a threat. He was my friend and he wouldn't do anything inappropriate. I was sure that he would get over his feelings and I knew he would never act on them. I just wished they knew that too. You're king. Dimitri's POV. I practically ran toward the training center. I couldn't wait to hold Maddie in my arms. I needed to spend time with her before I went back to work. I was too pissed off to be productive. I needed to relax. I needed to bury myself in my mate and forget everything that man wanted to do to her. I was the only one who could do that. I was the only one who could do it with her. I was the only one who would ever know how amazing she was. I was the only one who would know how amazing she sounded when she reached the end. Me. Only me. Both Skol and I were on edge. Both of us needed to hold her. He kept trying to convince me to let him out, but I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to stand by and let him get to her first. No. I was the one who would get to hold her before him. You are, Skol growled at me. I can't hold Sky. You could at least let me hold Maddie. I will, I growled back. But you will have to wait your turn. I was in no mood to argue with him. I was on the verge of snapping and his attitude was only making things worse. I ripped the door open and walked inside. I almost shifted at the spot when I saw Seth talking to Mike and Will. What was he doing here? Did he talk to her? Did he touch her? I would lose it if I found traces of his scent on her. Calm down. Will mind-linked me. He didn't do anything. They just talked. I handled it. I growled. I didn't want him talking to her. I didn't want him anywhere near her. I looked around and saw my mate talking to Ellie on the other side of the hall. I started walking toward her immediately. I could feel my canines elongating. I was so angry. Ellie noticed me first. She sighed when she looked at the state I was in. I could feel fur starting to grow on my arms. I was having trouble keeping Skol back. Maddie's back was turned to me and she didn't see me coming. She should have heard me, but she was focused on Ellie. She was talking to her about something, but I didn't care about what. Dimitri. Ellie tried to mind-link me, but I blocked her immediately. I didn't want to talk to her. I only wanted Maddie. I needed to take her home and I needed to get inside her. I needed it like I needed air to breathe. I grabbed Maddie as soon as I was close enough. She yelped in surprise as I turned her around and threw her over my shoulder. Dimitri, she spoke, but I interrupted her with a growl. I turned around and started walking back. What happened? She mind-linked me. Can you put me down? No. No. I responded. I am taking you back to our room. I need to you. Maddie wiggled in my arms and a second later I could smell her arousal. It really didn't help. Dimitri, Mike started talking, but I interrupted him with a growl as well. I couldn't understand why they all insisted on talking to me. I wasn't in the mood to talk. I kept my eyes on the door. I knew that I would lose it if I looked at Seth. I knew that he was staring at my mate and I didn't need the confirmation. I didn't need to add fuel to the already raging fire that was burning inside me. I started running as soon as I stepped outside. I tightened my hold on Maddie and turned my head so I could bury my nose into her perfect ass. She yelped in surprise, but I only tightened my hold on her to stop her from moving. I took a deep breath, letting the scent of her arousal calm my anger down. I mumbled. "Will you let your king?" Maddie moaned and I could hear her panting. I was looking around, making sure that no one would see what I was doing or hear her moans. Her perfect body was only mine to see. Her moans were only mine to hear. Thankfully, we were already in front of the pack house and I wouldn't have to wait long. I got inside and rushed upstairs, ignoring everything and everyone around me. I burst through our bedroom door and slammed it shut. I threw Maddie on our bed, and she started pulling her dress up immediately. She knew what I needed, and she was going to give it to me. I would normally spend a little bit more time making sure that she was ready for me, but I really didn't want to do that now. She was enough and I needed to get her now. "Mine," I growled as I started on her. "Mine, mine, mine, mine," I repeated after each and every time. Maddie was moaning. My whole body was buzzing with a mixture of anger and pleasure. I trying to get as much of her taste as possible. "Dimitri," she cried out. I saw stars when she started, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I growled loudly as I came. I exploded and my vision blackened. I couldn't stop growling, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. "Mine." "Yours," she said softly. "Only yours." She was mine. Only mine. "So you don't know?" Madeline's POV. Dimitri was a little bit calmer after we spent the night together. We didn't get much sleep, but I wasn't complaining. We both needed to be with each other. "He will be here in a few minutes," Will said as he sat on the couch. Dimitri nodded and tightened his arm around my waist. He refused to let me go. He was on edge and he looked at everyone as they were a threat to me. I wished that there was something I could do to reassure him, but nothing seemed to work. No matter what I did or said, Dimitri kept glaring and growling at everyone. Will told me to give him time, but I hated seeing him that upset. I wanted to help him immediately. "What is his name?" Ellie asked. "Oscar," I said. "He is great. You will like him." Ellie smiled and gave me a small nod. "So that they want another meeting after the Alphas leave?" Will asked angrily. Dimitri nodded. "They hinted that they were giving me time to change my mind. That will never happen, and I told them that. Nothing will change my mind about wanting that dead." A shiver went down my spine. I wished that things were different. I wished that Dimitri didn't have to go through that. I wished that he didn't have to talk about his mom like that. "Did you go see her?" Ellie asked. "No," Dimitri said, shaking his head. "I don't want to see the biche. She asked for me, but I told them to tell her." "What about Savannah and her child?" Ellie asked. Dimitri sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. "The child is with a couple Will and I found," Dimitri said. "They always wanted pups, but they can't have their own. They were more than happy to take him in." Ellie nodded and furrowed her eyebrows. "I wonder who the father is," she said. "Why didn't he take the pup in?" Dimitri shrugged. "I don't know. She refused to tell me who he is and he never came forward." I think that the child is better off without them, Will mumbled. His father can't be a good man. I took a deep breath and released it slowly. I felt bad for that little boy. He didn't deserve parents like that. Dimitri kissed my cheek and wrapped his arms around me tightly. I gave him a small smile. I didn't think it was possible, but I love you more each day. He mind-linked me. My smile grew. I wrapped my arms around his neck and hugged him tightly. I love you more each day too. I responded. My heart just keeps expanding. It won't fit into my chest pretty soon. Dimitri chuckled and rubbed my back gently. Okay, enough you two, Will said as he stood up and approached the door. Oliver is here. I let Dimitri go and tried to get up. No, Dimitri said, pulling me back to his lap. You will stay here, Maddie. I gave him a small nod and turned to Will. He opened the door and smiled. Beta Will, I heard Oliver's voice. It is lovely to meet you. Likewise, Oliver, Will said as he stepped aside so Oliver could walk in. Oliver walked inside and I smiled brightly. Maddie! Oliver exclaimed as he approached Dimitri's desk. It is so nice to see you. You are glowing, kid. My smile only grew. Dimitri growled at him, though. I looked at him and furrowed my eyebrows. What happened? That is close enough, Oliver, Dimitri said sternly. My eyes widened and I looked at Oliver. I was going to apologize to him, but he smiled and nodded. You are newly marked, aren't you? He asked as he sat down in one of the armchairs opposite the desk. I am so happy for you. Congratulations. Thank you, Oliver, I said, giving him a small smile. He smiled back and looked at Dimitri. Why am I here, my king? He asked. I hope that nobody is sick. Dimitri tightened his jaw and shook his head. You are not here because anyone is sick, Dimitri said. You are here because of Maddie. Oliver looked at me worriedly. Is everything okay? I gulped and took a deep breath. What if he told me that I was crazy? I am not sure, I said. Something weird happened after I became a part of this pack. I thought it was a mind link, but I stopped talking because I became really nervous. How would I even explain what was going on? Should I just tell him that I could read other people's minds? Oliver narrowed his eyes slightly. But, he asked after a few moments of silence. I felt little beads of sweat rolling down the back of my neck. My stomach was in a knot. A huge lump formed in my throat and I wasn't sure if I would be able to say it. Maddie. Dimitri called me quietly. Do you want me to do it? We talked previously and I asked him to let me tell Oscar. I wasn't sure if I could, though. So I looked at Dimitri and gave him a small nod. He kissed my shoulder and looked at Oscar. She can read minds, Dimitri said, and I could feel my heart stopping. She knows what other people are thinking. I stopped breathing. I was staring at Oscar, expecting him to look at me like I was crazy. But instead of that he looked at me and gasped. Is your wolf completely black? He asked, making me furrow my eyebrows. Why did the color of my wolf's fur matter? I don't know, I said, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. She refused to shift. She said that she was protecting me. I am not sure from what, though. Oliver's eyes widened. He glanced from me to Dimitri. So you don't know, he mumbled quietly. I could feel Dimitri tense up. His hold on me tightened. Will growled quietly. My heart raced and I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening. Know what? I asked after a few moments of silence. Oliver looked at me and gave me a small smile. That you are a leakin, Maddie. Throne. Unknown's POV. The room made me sick. It always did. No matter how many times I'd been there, I had never gotten used to the smell. It was a small room with no light. The only light we had was coming from the candles randomly scattered on the table in front of me. The walls were covered with mold and the smell of humidity was suffocating. It always made my stomach twist and turn. An occasional drip of water from an unknown source made me nervous. I wanted to find it and make it stop. It was annoying. We were sitting around the table. There were 6 chairs, but only 5 of us were present. They didn't like that at all. We are missing a member, he said, looking around the table. What happened? I sighed and resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I am working on it, I said, tightening my jaw. It won't be easy. He laughed and shook his head. Others just kept staring at me with angry expressions on their ugly faces. Nothing is easy when you are taking over a throne, he said. You know that. You should have expected it. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How should I have expected that? She went completely rogue. She ended up and they were blaming me for it. Were they serious? How should I have seen that coming? I asked, clenching my fists. She did that all on her own. I had nothing to do with it. If I had known, I would have stopped her. He snorted and shook his head. The others were still completely silent. Their silence was getting on my nerves. They were hiding behind him. As per usual. There must have been signs, he said. You should have known. I took a deep breath through my nose to try to calm myself down a little. I still wouldn't react, I said. I had no idea that she was his mate. It changed everything. You are really bad at your job, huh? He asked, laughing darkly. How didn't you see that coming? My sources tell me that he had been pining after her for months. They say that it was pretty obvious. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes again. I wasn't following him around, I mumbled. I was as close as I could possibly get. He chuckled again. It obviously wasn't close enough. I growled. I couldn't stop it. Okay, enough, I said angrily. It happened and there is nothing we can do about it. We can go over everything I did or didn't do, but it won't change. We need to figure out what to do now, not what we should have done before. He raised his eyebrows at me. Do you have any suggestions? I took a deep breath and released it slowly. We will all be at Alpha's meeting, I said. I am sure that we will be able to do a lot while we are there. He looked at the rest of the members and sighed. I was hoping to avoid that, he said. We are risking a lot. I snorted and shook my head. He looked back at me and narrowed his eyes. We have been risking a lot since we started meeting here, I said. We will get executed if we get caught here or there. It doesn't make a lot of difference. He tightened his jaw and smiled. It was forced, though. You are not wrong about that, my friend, he said, and my stomach twisted. We were not friends. We were just 2 men who wanted to reach the same goal. We were just 2 men who wanted to remove him from the throne. His mate is the key, I said. He would give away his throne for her. I am sure of it. He nodded. What should we know about her? Nothing, I said. She is just a regular wolf with a pretty face. She isn't worth much to us, but she is worth everything to him. He smirked. Pretty face, huh? I laughed and nodded. Really pretty face, I said. I am sure that you will enjoy spending time with her. I looked around the room and smirked. We will all enjoy spending time with her, I said, making others smile a little. I couldn't wait to have her under me. I'd been dreaming about it ever since I laid my eyes on her for the first time. I thought about all the different ways I would do with her. I thought about all the different ways she would scream my name. She didn't even have to scream my name. Just hearing her scream. I am looking forward to that, he said. Will it be easy to take her? I looked back at him and sighed. No, I said, shaking my head. He is very protective. It won't be easy to take her. He took a deep breath and clenched his fists. He didn't like that at all. Nothing is easy when you are taking over a throne, I reminded him, trying not to smirk. He growled and narrowed his eyes at me. Do not use my words against me, you rat, he said. Remember who will be the one sitting on that throne. I would watch what I was saying if I were you. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. He was going to be a terrible king, but that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted a king I could control, and he was stupid and arrogant enough to let me use him as a puppet. I apologize, I said, bowing my head a little. He rolled his eyes and leaned back in his chair. So taking his mate is our main goal, he said. We need her to convince him to give us his throne. I nodded. I am sure it won't take a lot of convincing. He will give it to us in a heartbeat. He smiled. He looked satisfied. That is wonderful to hear, he said. I can't wait to take back what belongs to me. Book 3. She is a Leakin. Dimitri's POV. She was a Leakin. She was really a Leakin. I was in shock. I could tell that Oliver asked us a question, but I couldn't hear him. I only saw his lips moving. I could only hear my blood pumping through my veins and my heart hammering against my chest. If it was true, then she was the rightful heir to the throne. If it was true, then she was the most powerful wolf in existence. If it was true, then she was in bigger danger than ever. Alpha Dimitri. Oliver's voice finally reached me. I flinched and looked at him. I tried to force my body to calm down a little so I could hear what he was saying. Who else knows about her ability? Oliver asked. I cleared my throat and shook my head. The four of us and the pack doctor, I mumbled. I glanced at Will and Ellie. Both of them were staring at Oliver with shocked expressions on their faces. Let's keep it that way, Oliver said sternly. No one else needs to know, and no one else can now. If I am right, then she is. Oliver stopped talking and looked at Maddie. She is the heir to the throne, I said, making him look back at me. He nodded slowly. I finally looked at my mate. She was pale and I wasn't even sure if she was breathing. She was staring at Oliver wide-eyed. Princess, I called her as I cupped her cheek and turned her head toward me. Breathe, my love. Everything is going to be okay. I wasn't sure if she heard me. I pressed my lips against hers and pulled her even closer to me. Breathe, Maddie, I mumbled as I rubbed her back. Come on, my love. She gulped and shook her head a little. I could tell and feel how confused and scared she was. I looked at Oliver, Will, and Ellie. Could you please give us a moment? I asked them. I knew that Maddie needed space. I could tell that she was overwhelmed. I needed to help her. I needed to calm her down a little bit. Sure, Will mumbled as he stood up. We will wait outside. I nodded and watched as the three of them left my office. Will glanced at Maddie one more time before he closed the door. I looked at her as soon as they were gone. Her eyes were on me, but I could tell that she was completely lost in thought. Her eyes were on me, but she wasn't looking at me. She was somewhere else. "Princess," I called her softly as I leaned in and kissed her cheek. "I need you to focus on my lips on your skin, okay? I need you to come back to me." I started leaving soft pecks all over her cheek and jaw. I kept my eyes on hers the entire time. I finally reached her lips and kissed her as softly and as gently as I could. She grabbed the back of my shirt and buried her head in my neck. "Oh, princess," I mumbled as I kissed her temple. "It's okay. I'm here. Nothing bad will happen, I promise. I won't let anyone or anything hurt you." I rubbed her back gently and took a deep breath, letting her scent soothe me. "I am not a threat," she mumbled. "I promise." "I won't," her voice broke and she stopped talking. I furrowed my brows. A threat? What was she talking about? I made her lift her head and look at me. "A threat?" I asked. "What do you mean, Maddie?" Her eyes widened and she shook her head. "I am not a threat," she said, her voice trembling. "I won't do anything, Dimitri. I promise. I don't care about it. I never have to shift. No one has to know." She sounded more and more panicked with each word she spoke. I could feel her trembling. I was so confused. What was she talking about? "A threat to who, Maddie?" I asked, caressing her cheek. She furrowed her brows a little. "To you," she mumbled, making my heart stop. "I won't take your throne, I promise. I am not a threat. I don't need it. I don't want it. I want you. I only want you. Please, please don't be mad at me. I didn't know. I really didn't know." She was sobbing and shaking by the time she finished talking. I was in shock. What was she talking about? She buried her face into her hands. I was too shocked to move. Did she really think that I saw her as a threat? Did she really think I was angry at her? Did she really think that anything between us would change? The only thing that would change would be the number of guards she would now have. The main one would be me. I was going to glue her to my side and never let her out of my sight. I didn't say anything about the throne. She could have it all. All I cared about was having her. I forced myself to move. I had to tell her all that. I couldn't just keep it inside. She had to know. "Princess," I said as I moved her hands from her face. "I am not angry. I don't care if you are the heir. I don't care if you have more right to that throne than I do." She gulped and I wiped the tears from her beautiful face. "All I need is you," I said softly as I leaned in and kissed the tip of her nose. "I don't see you as a threat, Maddie. I don't care about any of that. All I want is you. All I need is to keep you safe." I pulled her into a hug and kissed her temple. She wrapped her arms around me tightly. "I love you, Madeline," I added as I tangled my fingers into her hair and held her close to me. "Nothing will ever change that. Nothing is more important to me than you." She sobbed and tightened her arms around me even more. "I was so scared," she cried out. "I thought that," her voice broke and another sob escaped her. "I know, princess," I mumbled as I kissed her temple again. "But there is nothing to be scared about. I would never choose that throne over you. I would never choose anything or anyone over you." I leaned my head on hers and took a deep breath. "You are my heart and my soul, Maddie," I added quietly. "You are everything and I don't need anything else in this world. Still mine." Madeline's POV. My entire body was shaking. I was in shock. I was scared. I was in complete disbelief. I was shocked when Oliver said that I was a Leakin, but hearing Dimitri say that I was the heir. It was too much. The first thought that came to mind was that Dimitri would see me as a threat. He was the king. This was his kingdom. This was his throne. He deserved to be the leader. He deserved to sit on that throne, not me. All I wanted was my mate. I didn't want the throne. I didn't want to be the leader. I didn't want to be a Leakin. I wanted Dimitri. When he said that he didn't see me as a threat, a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I was finally able to breathe again. I couldn't stop sobbing. I was so relieved. But I was scared as well. What did it all mean? Was that the reason Sky refused to shift? Was she protecting me from finding out that I was a Leakin? Was it even real? Maybe Oliver was wrong. Maybe it wasn't true. Oliver could be wrong, I mumbled quietly. Maybe it's not true. Dimitri kissed my temple and ran his fingers through my hair. Maybe, he said. But I doubt it, princess. You being a Leakin explains a lot. I lifted my head and Dimitri gave me a small smile. He wiped the tears from my cheeks and placed a soft kiss on my lips. Like what? I asked quietly. Dimitri raised an eyebrow at me. Me being a Leakin explains what? I asked. Dimitri tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and sighed. Sky refusing to shift to protect you, he said. You having powers. I nodded and took a deep breath. Dimitri caressed my cheek and smiled. Don't worry, Maddie, okay, he said softly. I won't let anything happen to you. I will protect you from everything and everyone. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. I really want to be alone with you, I mumbled against his lips. I got so scared that I would lose you. I need to feel you inside me. I need to feel your skin against mine. I need you. Dimitri grunted, pressing me closer to him. He lifted his hips and I could feel how hard he was. An intense feeling of need washed over me. Maddie, Dimitri mumbled as he lowered his head and kissed my mark. You are driving me insane. Just hearing you say that you need me is enough to make me so hard. I moaned and moved my head to give him better access to my neck. I meant every word that I said. I wanted him. I needed him. I needed him so much. I got so scared. I really thought that I would lose him. I really thought that he wouldn't want me anymore. I needed to feel him everywhere to assure myself that he was still mine. His mouth and his tongue were driving me insane. He kept biting, sucking, and licking my neck and I felt like I was going to burst. I kept touching him and grinding against him. I felt him shiver every time I ran my hand down his perfect back. Dimitri, I cried out quietly as the need I felt started to become painful. Madeline, he growled quietly. I can't FK you when there are 3 people waiting outside. I didn't care about them. I needed him. But I can do this, he mumbled. If you do as I say, I will so hard tonight that you will never again think about me leaving you or choosing someone or something else over you, he continued, making me shiver. Am I clear? I just nodded. I couldn't speak. Good girl, he growled as he kissed me again. Rub yourself against me, he ordered as he lowered his head and started kissing my neck again. He didn't have to tell me twice. I closed my eyes and started moving faster. Very good, my queen, Dimitri said as he lifted his head and cupped my cheek. He turned my head back and kissed me hard. Eyes on me, he said, and I opened my eyes immediately. The love and desire I saw in his eyes made my entire body tremble. I was so close. Just a few more pushes and I was going to explode. Yes, Madeline, he said as he kissed me hard. My movements slowed down after a few moments. I was exhausted. He smirked. He mumbled. You taste so good. I almost came again. I was staring at him and I wasn't even breathing. He opened his eyes after he finished cleaning his fingers. He smirked and pulled me in for a kiss. I can't wait to be inside you tonight, my queen, he mumbled, making me moan quietly. You were so good. You deserve to be pleasured as soon as we go back to our room. I smiled and kissed him again. I love you. He mind-linked me. You are mine. He was right. I was his. I was still his. What now? Dimitri's POV. Every word she said was true. She was really scared of losing me. She really needed me. I felt everything through our bond and my heart almost gave out. Like I would ever choose anything or anyone else over her. Like I would leave her. Like I would be so stupid to give up the best thing that ever happened to me. No. I was a lot of things, but I wasn't insane. I knew that I had to give her what she needed. I felt her desperation. I felt her need for reassurance. I felt her burning desire and passion. I felt her need to have me. But I knew that I couldn't FK her here. Not because of the people who were waiting outside our office, but because I knew that I wouldn't be able to stop myself. I already knew that we would have to lock our office and spend an entire day here. I was just as desperate to reassure her as she was to be reassured. I knew that I had to remain in control, so I found another way to give myself to her. It was still hot and I still wanted to lock those doors, bend her over the table. But I was definitely in more control than I would have been if I got a taste of her. I kissed her temple and ran my fingers through her hair. Are you feeling a bit better, princess? I asked her after a few minutes of hugging and caressing each other. Yes, she mumbled quietly. Thank you, Dimitri. I needed this. She looked up at me and smiled. And I can't wait to get every other part of you tonight, she added softly, and a quiet groan escaped me. Oh, I can't wait either, my love, I mumbled as I kissed her softly. I reached between us and buttoned her jeans. I looked back up at her and smiled. Can we call them back in? I asked her. The sooner we are done with them, the sooner we can go back to our room. She smiled and nodded. Come back, Will. I mind-linked him immediately. I placed another soft kiss on her lips just as the door opened. Will walked in, followed by Oliver and Ellie. Are you okay, Maddie? Ellie asked worriedly. Maddie looked at her and nodded. I am feeling a bit better. I am sorry. I was just a little bit shocked. There is no need to apologize, Mads, Will said as he sat down. It's understandable. Maddie looked at Oliver and took a deep breath. Could you be wrong? She asked him. Oliver sighed and furrowed his brows. I don't think that I am, Maddie, he said. The kind of power you have could only be explained by you being a Leekan and a direct descendant of the Kingdom of Gold Fangs. Maddie furrowed her brows a little. Kingdom of Gold Fangs, she mumbled. Oliver nodded. The legends say that the royals of the Kingdom of Gold Fangs had powers. They ranged from controlling other people's behavior to being able to see into the future. Wow, Will mumbled quietly. But I can't do that, Maddie mumbled. Oliver gave her a small smile. You have your own power, Maddie. She sighed and bit her lower lip. Did you talk to Sky? Oliver asked her. She looked at him and shook her head. Talk to her, Maddie, Oliver said. Try to get her to shift. We need to confirm it. Skol, I called my wolf, but he interrupted me. I am talking to her, Dimitri, he said. Maddie is shutting her out. I think that she is afraid to know the truth. I gulped and tried to take a deep breath. So it's true? I asked. She is a leakin. Skol was silent for a moment. Yes, he said, making my heart race. That's why Sky refused to shift. She was protecting her from everyone else knowing. She is in so much danger, Dimitri. If someone finds out who she is, Skol stopped talking because a wave of panic washed over him. I know, I said. I will protect her, Skol. We will protect her. What do we do now? Will mumbled, interrupting my conversation with my wolf. I tightened my hold on Maddie. No one can know, I said, using my alpha order. You are not allowed to tell anyone who she is and what she can do. The three of them bowed their heads immediately. Yes, Alpha, they said at the same time. Oliver wasn't a part of my pack, but I was his king and my alpha order worked on him as well. I barely knew him and I had to assure myself that he wouldn't betray his king and queen. I trusted Will and Ellie with my life, but I needed to be sure that they wouldn't tell. Being bound by the Alpha Order was the best way to do it. The pack doctor wasn't going to tell anyone anything. He was already under my Alpha's order not to tell anyone about her power. He didn't know who she was and it was going to stay like that. No one could know. I have to tell Mike, Maddie mumbled, making me look at her. She gulped and took a deep breath. She looked at me and I saw fear in her eyes. You don't have to tell him, Maddie, I said as I caressed her cheek. He doesn't need to know. I didn't want him to know. Becoming a Leakin was his obsession for many years. He abandoned his family because of it. I wasn't sure how he would react knowing that Maddie was a Leakin and he wasn't. I have to, Dimitri, Maddie said, shaking her head. He can't find out from someone else. I have to tell him. He won't find out, Mads, Will said and she looked at him. We are all under the Alpha Order. We can't tell anyone. Maddie shook her head. It will come out eventually, she said. We will have to tell the pack eventually. I don't want him to find out like that. She was right. Eventually, everyone would find out who she was. Not before I made sure that she was safe, though. Not before we knew what it all meant. She looked back at me and gulped. I want to tell him now, she added. I took a deep breath and released it slowly. Okay, princess, I said and caressed her cheek. We will tell him now. How will he react? Dimitri's POV. Maddie was shaking from top to bottom and I started doubting my decision to let her tell him. We don't have to do it, Maddie, I said as I rubbed her back gently. He doesn't have to know yet. She looked at me and shook her head. He has to know, Dimitri, she said. He deserves to know. I can't keep this from him. I sighed and glanced at Will. He was looking at Maddie with a mixture of worry and anger on his face. I could tell that he wasn't too happy with her decision. I wasn't happy with it either, but I didn't want to be a jerk. Mike was her dad and if she wanted him to know, I wasn't going to do anything to stop her. But I wasn't sure about his reaction. How would he react once he found out that she was a Leakin? I was sure that Mike would never hurt her. I would never let her tell him if there was even a small part of me that thought he was a danger to her. Mike was a lot of things and he made a lot of mistakes, but he would never hurt his daughter. I was so sure of that. But would he get angry? Would he get depressed? I had no idea. I could hear him approaching the office. Maddie started bouncing her leg up and down. I placed a hand on her thing and raised an eyebrow at her. It's still not too late, I said. She shook her head and looked at the door. Mike walked in with a smile that disappeared as soon as he looked at Maddie. What happened? He asked worriedly. Why are you so pale? He closed the door and started approaching her. Hi, Michael, Oliver spoke, making Mike stop and look at him. His eyes widened. Oliver, he mumbled quietly. Oliver smiled and stood up. He approached Mike and pulled him into a hug. It's good to see you, Mike, Oliver said, patting Mike's back. I am so sorry about Leah. I did everything I could. I could feel Maddie tense up. I took her hand in mine and squeezed it tightly. Mike gulped and let go of Oliver. Thank you for being there for Leah and my little girl, Mike said. Thank you for making it easier on Leah. Oliver nodded and gave him a small smile. I wish that there was something else I could have done, Oliver said. I wish she was here with us today. A wave of sadness washed over Maddie. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her to me. Your mom is always with you, my love. I mind-linked her. She is watching over you. Maddie wrapped her arms around my waist and I kissed the top of her head. Mike nodded and looked back at Maddie. Maddie, honey, what's wrong? He asked worriedly as he continued walking toward us. Sit down, Mike, please, I said calmly. He looked at me and furrowed his brows. I will explain everything in a minute, I said, giving him a small smile. Just sit down, please. Mike looked at Maddie and sat down next to Will. Are you okay, Maddie? Mike asked. Is something wrong? Please just say something. I am freaking out here. She is okay, Mike, I said. There is something we need to, I am a leakin'. Maddie exclaimed, interrupting me. I looked at her in surprise. We agreed to do this slowly, explaining everything we knew so far. She was staring at Mike wide-eyed and she wasn't breathing. She looked like she was surprised with what she did as well. Wow, subtle, Maddie, Will mumbled, shaking his head at her. I heard Ellie snorting quietly. I looked at Mike and saw him looking at Maddie with a confused expression on his face. What? He asked quietly. Maddie was silent now. I sighed and ran my fingers through my hair. She is a leakin', Mike, I said, making him look at me. She is not a regular wolf. His eyes widened. I knew that something was different about her when her wolf refused to shift on the night of her 18th birthday, I started explaining. Sky said that she refused to do it to protect Maddie. We didn't know then what she was protecting her from. Mike glanced at Maddie and took a deep breath. Maddie started hearing voices the day I made her a member of our pack, I continued, deciding to be as direct as possible. She thought that our pack members were mind-linking her, but she was wrong. She could hear their thoughts. She could read their minds. Mike visibly paled. He looked at her and gasped loudly. She is the heir, he mumbled, shock written all over his face. I furrowed my brows. How did he know? Maddie tensed up again. I am so sorry, she mumbled, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't want this, Mike, I promise. Mike's shocked face turned into a confused one. What are you talking about, Maddie? He asked quietly. Maddie took a deep breath, but it got caught in her throat. I knew that she wouldn't be able to explain it to him. She was worried about how you would react, I said, making Mike look back at me. We were all kind of worried. Mike's eyes widened and I saw hurt flash in them. Did you think that I would hurt her? He asked quietly. His voice was laced with pain and sadness. No, Mike, I said sternly. Never. I know you and I know that you would never hurt her. He gave me a small nod and took a deep breath. I was worried that you would get angry, I said. Maybe a bit sad. I didn't really know how to explain it. Mike nodded and looked at Maddie. He took another deep breath and stood up. I watched him approach Maddie. She tensed up a little and I rubbed her back, trying to relax her. Mike kneeled in front of her and took her hands in his. I love you, Maddie, he said. I love you with my entire heart and I would never do anything to hurt you. I did it once and I hate what it did to you, me, and our relationship. I won't be making that mistake again. Maddie let out a quiet sob and Mike pulled her into his arms. She hugged him tightly and I couldn't help but smile a little. I was glad she had him in her life. Mike made a huge mistake, but he was a different person now. He was the father she needed. Explain it to me. Madeline's POV. I was so relieved. I was so scared that Mike would hate me. I was terrified that he would abandon me again. I was terrified that he would be angry or that he would resent me. I didn't want it to happen. We just started fixing our relationship. I felt ready to let him back into my life. I didn't want to lose him even before I got him back. Oh, my baby, Mike mumbled as he kissed the top of my head and rubbed my back. It's okay. Everything is going to be okay. I took a deep breath and let him go. He gave me a small smile and wiped my cheeks. My beautiful little girl, he said quietly as he leaned in and kissed my forehead. It felt weird hearing him call me that, but I would be lying if I said that it didn't feel nice. I was so angry at him, but I also missed him. I missed having a dad. I missed playing with him. I missed laughing with him. My mom used to tell me stories about him and she would always say that he was a great father. She would tell me stories about him playing with me, reading me fairy tales before bed, and making me my favorite breakfast in the morning. She would tell me stories about the three of us spending wonderful time together and I always missed it. I missed my dad. I didn't want him back in my life because I was so angry. I didn't want him back because I was scared he would leave me again. That fear exploded inside of me when Oliver told me I was a leakin. I was sure that Mike would be angry. I was sure he would leave me again. Thank you, I mumbled, my voice quiet and raspy. Mike smiled and caressed my cheek again. For what, honey? He asked. I gulped and tried to take a deep breath. For not being angry, I said. For not blaming me. Mike's eyes widened. He cupped my cheeks and shook his head. Never, Maddie, he said. I would never blame you. There is nothing to blame you for. If anything, I am so incredibly proud of you. He sighed and let me go. He glanced at Dimitri and ran his fingers through his hair. I get why you thought that I would get angry, he mumbled. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you and your mom. Mike took my hands in his and squeezed them. But I was a different person back then, Maddie, he continued. I was 20 years old when you were born. I was young and delusional. I believed in stories I shouldn't have even listened to. I am not the same person anymore. He pulled me closer to him and wrapped me up in a tight hug. I am more than ready to be the father you need, Maddie, he said as he rubbed my back gently. I love you so much, my little girl, and nothing will ever change that. I felt a tear fall on my cheek. Mike let go of me and wiped the tears from my cheeks. You could be turning into a cat and I would still love you, he said, smirking a little. Will and Dimitri snorted. A quiet chuckle escaped me. Oliver and Ellie smiled. Mike grinned widely before his smile disappeared and he got serious again. I mean it, Mads, he said as he ran his fingers through my hair. I am here. I will never leave or choose anything or anyone else over you again. I promise. I smiled and wrapped my arms around his neck again. Mike kissed my temple and hugged me back. I love you, honey, he said quietly. I loved him too, I really did. I loved him even when I was so angry at him. I loved him even when I didn't know where he was. I wanted to tell him that I loved him too, but the words refused to leave my lips. Mike kissed my temple again and let me go. He took a deep breath and looked at Dimitri. I want you to explain everything to me, Mike said as he took my hand in his. How did you figure out that she can hear other people's thoughts? Dimitri sighed and looked at me. She complained that everyone was trying to mind link her at the same time, Dimitri said, giving me a small smile. She said that it made her head hurt and that she needed to get used to it. I knew immediately that something was off. Mike took another deep breath and released it slowly. Can you hear my thoughts now? He asked me. I shook my head. I can't hear anyone's thoughts when Dimitri is with me. I furrowed my brows and bit my lower lip. Well, except Janet's and Kendrick's, I mumbled. I could feel Dimitri tense up. What do you mean, Maddie? Oliver asked. I looked at him and took a deep breath. I can't read minds when Dimitri is with me, I started explaining. The only exceptions are Janet and Kendrick. I could hear their thoughts when Dimitri was with me. What were they thinking about? Oliver asked, furrowing his brows. I gulped. Dimitri growled. They thought about hurting me, I said quietly. Mike squeezed my hand tighter and I could feel anger rolling off him in waves. What does that mean? Mike asked angrily. Why could she hear their thoughts, but not others? I wish I knew the answer to that question. Well, one thing comes to mind, Oliver said, sighing loudly. I looked at him and I could feel my heart racing. What? Dimitri asked angrily. Oliver took a deep breath and raised his brows. They were a real threat, Oliver said. Their thoughts were so vile and imposed a real threat to you. Their thoughts were stronger than your protector. My heart started drumming against my ribcage. What were they thinking about, Maddie? Mike asked, his voice laced with anger. I kept my eyes on Oliver. Fear made my stomach twist. They were a real threat. Overwhelmed. Dimitri's POV. I closed our bedroom door and looked at Maddie. My heart clenched painfully. She looked so tired and so overwhelmed. Princess, I called her quietly as I approached her. She looked at me and took a deep breath. I finally reached her and wrapped my arms around her. I am so done with everything, she mumbled as she hugged me back. I am tired. I ran my fingers through her hair and kissed her temple. I know, my love, I said softly. I can see it. I needed to find a way to relax her. I needed to find a way to show her that she wasn't alone in this. I needed to find a way to show her how much I loved her. What day is it? She asked after a few moments of silence. When is the Alpha's meeting starting? I ran my fingers through her hair again. I honestly didn't know the answer to that question. I completely lost track of time. In a day or two maybe. Or maybe even more. 3 or 4 days. I had no idea. But I knew that I wasn't going to talk about it with her. She needed to relax. She needed to forget about everything. She needed a night of peace and quiet. We are not talking about that, princess, I said as I rubbed her back gently. You are going to let me take care of you. You are going to let your mate do everything he possibly can to help you relax. She sighed and leaned more into me. That sounds nice, she mumbled quietly. I smiled and then an idea popped up in my head. I picked her up and she yelped in surprise. What are you doing? She asked, her eyes widening. I am helping you relax, I said, giving her a small smile. I opened the bathroom door and walked to the vanity. I put her on top of it and kissed her forehead. She furrowed her brows and I winked at her. I let her go and started preparing us a bath. Maddie chuckled, making me look at her. That already looks amazing, she said. I smiled and walked back toward her. I had a minute or two before the bathtub filled and I really wanted to hold her. I smiled and caressed her cheek. I love you, princess, I said as I started taking her shirt off. She lifted her arms so I could pull the shirt over her head. I started kissing her neck gently and threw the shirt on the floor behind me. Maddie sighed contently and wrapped her arms and legs around me. I love you too, she mumbled. I love you so much it hurts. I can't imagine my life without you. I don't want to imagine my life without you. I placed a soft kiss on her jaw and looked at her. It's a good thing that you don't have to, I said, smirking a little. You are kind of stuck with me. She chuckled and cupped my cheek. I am? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Oh, yes, I said as I reached behind her and unclasped her bra. I am yours and I expect to be treated as such, my queen. She laughed and kissed my neck softly. Well, then I must order you to take your clothes off and let me worship what's mine, she said, making my entire body tremble. She didn't have to ask me twice. I was in front of her only a few seconds later. She smiled and ran her hands down my chest. I think that the bath is done, Maddie chuckled, making me look over my shoulders. I mumbled and rushed to turn the water off. Maddie jumped off the counter and approached me. I turned around and saw that she had taken the rest of her clothes off. My heart skipped a beat. I saw her so many times since her birthday, but I would never get used to how beautiful she was. She always took my breath away. She always made my heart skip a beat. I helped her get inside the tub. Is the water okay? I asked and she gave me a small nod. Get in, she said as she reached out for me. I smiled and got inside the tub. I sat behind her and pulled her to my chest. She sighed contently as soon as I wrapped my arms around her. I kissed her temple and she rested her head on my shoulder. Thank you, she mumbled quietly. What for? I asked as I ran my hands down her body. I gently squeezed and caressed every part of her I could reach. She kept sighing and moaning quietly. For doing this, she said. I needed it. I smiled and turned my head so I could kiss her cheek. Of course, princess, I said softly. You are not alone in this. I am in it with you. I am here for you in every way possible. She looked at me and smiled. How did I get this lucky? She asked and caressed my cheek. I shrugged and smirked. I'm a catch, aren't I? I said, wiggling my brows. Maddie laughed and nodded. Oh, yes you are. I leaned in and kissed her softly. I ran my hand up her body until I reached her shoulders. I started massaging her firmly, but gently. I lowered my lips to her jaw and her neck. She moaned quietly and it made me smile. I could feel her relax and it was all that mattered to me. I started kissing her collarbone and her shoulder and I started massaging her upper arms. Oh, Dimitri, she sighed quietly. I enjoyed the taste of her skin on my lips and my tongue. I wanted more of it and I couldn't stop kissing her. She leaned her head back on my shoulder and sighed again. I smiled and placed another kiss on her neck. I love you, she mumbled. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't respond. I reached my mark on her neck and kissed it gently. She moaned and placed her hands on my thighs. She started running her hands up, making me flinch and moan. She turned around and straddled me. She kissed me gently and I knew that we wouldn't leave that bathtub anytime soon. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.